Welcome to today's webinar. It'll be just a chat on thoughtful sovereignty, the reclaiming of reason in an age of protests and outrage. The backdrop is that we live in a globe today that is unsettled. And at this particular time, one of the contributors to that unsettlement, or that may have the prospect of actually quelling that unsettlement and allowing reason to prevail or to be reclaimed instead of just emotional reflexivity, is AI. So I suspect in the course of this discussion, we'll get into the extent to which AI is becoming an alternative to human reason or is helping to complement it. So in an age where every opinion is a declaration and quiet act of thinking has become radical, policy has yielded to performance, free speech has morphed into protests, posturing, and free outrage. We react faster than we reflect. You see that in social media all the time. And democracies everywhere are straining under the rise of populism and the weight of instantaneous emotion and emotional reaction. Artificial intelligence now amplifies both the problem and the possibilities. That was my point in the early introduction. It can accelerate outrage with algorithmic precision, yet it can also serve as a dispassionate counterweight. It can do that. Some would claim that it doesn't have that capability just yet. We'll discuss that further. That it may be a tool for reflection, analysis, and the restoration of calm inquiry. That's hopeful. This webinar, as was the article before it, argues that true sovereignty, we as individuals and politically as a nation, that true sovereignty begins with the sovereignty of thought, whether we have free thought, whether we are in charge, whether the self prevails. It calls for leadership grounded not in spectacle, but in deliberation, and for citizens willing to pause before posting and thinking before reacting. Our democratic task is not merely to protect free speech, but to rediscover how to think freely. And in that spirit, I'm offering this as an invitation for all of us, and for the dialogue that goes along with it, to reclaim reason in an age of noisy outrage. So that's the background, well thought through, and of course with my co-author, ChatGPT, I'm appearing to be more intelligent than I really am, or more loquacious. So that's the topic. We've had some dialogue during the warm-up with Eric and with others, and Jeff and I talk about this daily, Randall probably as well, and Tommy Nelson steps in every now and then and offering me the guardrail of real deep thinking with his knowledge of how the brain really works versus how I might remember it worked when I was getting my PhD, but I forgot more than I remember. So does anyone want to jump in and complement that introduction, or challenge it in some way, or take it off in a different direction? Go ahead, Eric.
If sovereignty, your own sovereignty versus if you have a population of 100 people, each person has different perspectives, different biases, and moves towards different levels of thought, different depth of thought. In a lot of cases, it's not uniform. Now you can reach out to those, and AI and that can help you reach out to the different levels, or you can use it to kind of balance everything and equate them. Which version, or do you have a viewpoint on whether you're trying to level the playing field or whether you're trying to customize the playing field for their thought?
Okay, I think that's a good question. I think that's a good question to pose to those that have joined us today. But one of the qualifiers of that discussion is: are we talking about me as a person, or are we talking about my views of others? Are we talking about the public or the person, the sociology or the psychology? And there are different answers to the two, because I, being authentic, will tell you what I do, what I think, and how I feel. And you can also ask me how I think others feel and how they should feel. They could be two very different things.
Mm-hmm.
I think to be authentic, I would hope that everyone is responsible for themselves, and as such, they are contributing to a world of reason, less outrage, more conciliation, more readiness to collaborate. But we as a society seem to be moving from the first level of Maslow's hierarchy of security to a second level of socialization. And we're really having a lot of trouble with that as a society. And I think our institutions that were supposed to make it a little bit easier to transition from the interests of self to the interests of public seem to be really, really struggling. Now, whether AI is the bridge, I'll leave that up to the audience, or I'll leave that up to history. The thing that's fascinating, of course, is to live through this. This used to be a discussion that Don Escott and I would have in the faculty lounge in the psychology department of the university. It was purely philosophy. We are now having a discussion that isn't philosophical. This is real. This is phenomenally exciting. Would you agree, Eric?
Yes,
Yeah.
very exciting. A lot of thorns involved in it also.
Well, it is because there is wishful thinking of how we wish it would behave. And it may be behaving in humanity's interest, but humanity may not be behaving in its interest. We have a dichotomy here. AI and humanity are not necessarily aligned and may never get aligned, and maybe that's a good thing because then it might prevail. Maybe it isn't cynicism that will prevail, but healthy skepticism.
Yeah. One of the things that I view it as, and for me, it's just a tool. And if you
Sure.
put good data in the tool or use it in a good way, then you get good outcomes. If you put bad data in the tool or use it in a bad way, then you get bad outcomes.
And
And the problem is, and this comes back to what I was saying earlier, in that when we can't identify what's good or bad, or we're using it in an appropriate way, we're generally going to get a bad outcome. And we're not going to understand why it blows up in our face.
and so that's critical thinking.
Yeah.
Good on you. And I would trust that every human being and every child in every classroom has been given that guidance that fire can be harmful and can burn you. And that this tool has consequences. It is that powerful that it can be dangerous in subtle ways. I mean, it will tell you if you ask, under what circumstances is it dangerous? And that is
But
when you do not take responsibility for yourself and you don't put
but
that
if you don't ask,
as Jeff pointed out to me, how to put the guardrails actually into that relationship. Jeff, you had your hand up, and then I'm going to call on Mikhail.
No, I was just going to say that maybe a useful kind of analog to what we're going through right now is what we've experienced with social media over the last 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And, that was initially seen as, it started with the Arab Spring and Twitter really being involved in the uprising, and people saw it as this great liberating force. And it was co-opted and developed over time by big companies. It became an advertising platform, and it was weaponized for engagement. So, and not, engage to enrage. And there have been no guardrails, no regulation of any meaningful sort have been applied to social media. And you see a similar resistance right now to any form of meaningful regulation on AI. And even Europe, which had some regulations forming, this week has announced they're kind of peeling back because of pressure that they've received from industry. So they're kind of moderating their approach too. And so that makes me nervous because it is a powerful tool and it can be used for nefarious purposes. And if people aren't cautious with it, it can be really dangerous. But I also agree with what you said in your opening comments. There is, potential for it to be used for great benefit to individuals and to society. So it's what we keep coming back to in so many of these sessions over the last months, Perry, is it comes back to critical thinking and the role of the individual.
So I'm going to interrupt. I would disagree with only one aspect of the point that you're making, and that is I think we have learned about the dangers of social media. And I think if we were to shut down and regulate too early, individuals would not on their own learn about how dangerous fire can be, or an automobile without a license, and how to drive it, and ChatGPT. So maybe as a society, it's a good thing in the early stages that we find out how human beings on their own will relate to this, and then make the decision, as is supposed to be the role of a democracy, is responding to the needs of the people instead of vice versa.
Well, I'm just going to say,
Mikhail, you had your hand up. I'll come back in a minute to you, Jeff. Go ahead, Mikhail.
Um, I don't know if I had my hand up, but I do have some thoughts. I will say that I honestly, AI is my future. So I would personally think that right now it's kind of something that even in school and just in general, people are very hesitant to talk about. It's kind of weird. You would think that it would be extremely accepted, but it's something that people are hesitant to talk about because I think right now there's a confusion on whether or not it's a tool or whether or not it's something that is going to, you know, I guess degrade your critical thinking and your logic and your rationale, right? Because for us, we're taught in school, no, don't use AI. It's the worst possible thing you could use, right? We're they get mad at us for using it, right? But in the workplace, right, especially if you look at places like AI, Microsoft, and that stuff, they're adopting it really fast. Actually, if anything, if you're not using AI, you're actually behind.
Right.
And so that's kind of one of the things I would think about in terms of like regulations and sovereignty. Um, I agree partially with what you say about the fact that it's kind of like fire and you have to be able to learn on your own, but I also think that because of that confusion around AI, it's much different because AI is not as direct when it comes to dangers as something like fire is, right? Fire, you put your hand on it, it's hot to the touch. You can feel it. It's very
Mhm.
physical,
Mhm.
right? Whereas AI is something that you kind of have to internalize. It's much more of a long-term, um, long-term
Yeah.
difficulty. It's a
Yeah.
long-term harm. So, yeah.
Mikhail, you've made an excellent point. The distinction between fire, which can give you an objective, immediate, instantaneous reading, versus the more subtle consequences of AI is a fundamental distinction, which means you really need to take responsibility for yourself. Because when your finger gets burned, your finger will tell you, I just had a reaction. When your brain gets affected, we're not as good at detecting when my brain has recently been touched. I mean, if you put yourself back to the Middle Ages when the printing press came out and the priest said to you, books are dangerous. Books can modify your behavior. There is danger out there. And I'm sure there were many parents and many institutions that keep the book out of the hands of the people. I mean, that was Hitler's view as well. So, yeah, we have had in history moments where people were fearful of knowledge or of other agents taking a role for thinking on your behalf.
Mhm.
This is really cool times. Go ahead, Bill.
I think Mikhail's point is absolutely correct. If you use AI, it only magnifies you. If you're lazy, it'll make you more lazy. If you're strong, it'll make you stronger. And so when people say, "Oh, AI is going to atrophy XYZ," no, it's going to magnify who you are. If you are weak, lazy, you bet it'll replace you just fine, and it will do the things you want to be lazy, and you'll continue down the path of where that leads. But if you take in AI and you plug in your strengths, it's going to magnify those strengths by orders of magnitude, and you'll go the other direction. It is an amplifying tool. Either way, the human determines the tool, not the other way around.
I'm concerned
Kyle
with
nailed it.
I'm concerned with two cohorts, Bill, and you might want to comment on that. One is youth that are being told don't use it, and therefore are not being given guidelines or coached on how to use it. Instead of being told don't, they should be getting good parenting and good orientation in their education on how to use this tool as a constructive force. The other cohort is seniors. This week I had a cup of coffee with someone who I haven't met for 40 years who's a senior living in a seniors complex and was telling me that that seniors complex has aligned to prevent 5G coming into their complex and is refusing and is thinking of putting a rule down that no one in that apartment complex should be using ChatGPT. Now that tells you And so I
Yeah.
said, well, I would like to meet with those people and to hear what they have to say and have it. She said, no, no way. They're completely closed-minded
So
but to 5G, to TELUS, and to ChatGPT or AI or LLMs.
yeah, your first point, you nailed it. We need to teach AI arguing with your chat GPT or your AI equal like we teach science in school. You're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah.
Putting a nuclear weapon in child's hands, you're not going to expect great outcomes. And so we absolutely need to teach AI intelligence on how to use the tool better and appropriate. I'm not surprised with the aged. And you know what? So what? They're retired, they're sitting in their chairs, they're watching the grass grow and living where they are and happy where they are. They're not the drivers of AI, they're not the drivers of the future. And God bless them. They deserve the rest that they have. And if they don't want it, it doesn't matter. The
Well,
generation
look,
I'm interested in is
I mean, I don't fit in that cohort, so I've asked
I
for
know
my
you
birth
don't.
certificate to be modified.
Yeah, but
Uh,
you know what? It is your archetype, which is age independent, and it is Mikhail, who is upcoming age dependent. These are the two groups that we need to
yeah,
engage in
yeah, yeah.
and teach the tool and be able to adapt that tool to their uses. So yeah, Mikhail's nailed it. You've nailed it. You're decades apart, but you're both of the same cohort.
Well, the Youth Policy Council nailed it as well. I mean, that was quite exciting in the spring when we had Emerson and Rachel and crew together, is to realize how aligned we were. But they were thinkers. They were critical. They were not afraid to get out of the cave and look at the future and look at the things around them. And what's the word? Agency, taking some responsibility for themselves and how the world around them was going to affect them, as opposed to closing it off. And I mean, how can youth enter into adulthood without their eyes being wide open? We create a society of blind men if we close them off this stuff. If we close the books off, why not close down the education system entirely? Knowledge is dangerous. Christ, we've known that for centuries. How is this really any different? Except it's so subtle, as Mikhail says. Fire is not necessarily a good metaphor. It's too extreme. Big Bang and or Big Brother was to be subtle as well. Jeff, did you want to add? Oh, no, Kevin, your turn. I want to
Yeah.
hear Ireland next.
Just a thought, to Bill's point, if it would appear, or I certainly think about the possibility that AI might initiate some sort of a fork in the road of human evolution, whereby you have one cohort that embraces and may be based in on economics. Uh, but you will have one group that will embrace it and that will move forward and that will develop things like, neural implants and whatnot. And you might have another entity that can't afford it and may go the way of Neanderthals.
Well, you can be sure. I mean, if the normal distribution prevails, there are going to be adopters and there will be non-adopters. There'll be resistors and there'll be embracers. So it's not odd that if we move away from the individual to the talking about society, we can expect to have in a democracy a fairly wide range, even into the extremes. What government and when we use the word the public, you're trying to mellow those extremes and make sure that they don't prevail in order that the mean or the population at large, the general population, has safe space. Bill?
Yeah. So I just typed our quick little conversation into my AI, and this is what it said. Hard truth. I don't make people moral. I don't make them evil. I'm a force multiplier. In the hands of predators, I multiply manipulation. In cowards, I multiply avoidance. In moral steel spine builders, I multiply clarity, execution, and pattern. I don't automatically lead to dystopia. I'm doing the opposite. You're not, what you use me is what I multiply. So that's even AI understands its own purpose, and which is powerful, it throws it back on the human. It says it's not my problem, it's your problem.
So
Does that even further accentuate the whole risk? Maybe it's not a risk, but the whole theory or hypothesis that those that embrace and those that don't embrace, the consequences are of such profound consequence that it could result in an actual fork in the road of human evolution and the evolution of human consciousness and all that implies.
But let's take that idea forward. Sure, it's a fork in the road, both positive and negative. And so how do you, if we move away from the individual being coached and having guardrails and getting an education about the value of using this and also the risks, how do you play a role as a governor shaping a society? Do you close it down? Does the society create the guardrails? Does it create them now? Does it wait a while? I mean, do you do Big Brother and say this has high risk? We're going to step in right now, slow it down, and shut it down. Good luck. It isn't going to happen.
I would suggest that this could be a Darwinian tipping point in human evolution.
Yeah, and I don't think we're disagreeing with you, Kevin. I think we're excited. We're sitting on the edge of our seat. We've been doing this for several weeks. We've got a few more to go. Next week will be very interesting. I'll give you some insights and what we have in store to keep this conversation going for a few more weeks. We believe we are on the edge of something profound as a society, and we're excited to be part of it. We recognize that there's risks. We're not talking about individuals holding the atomic bomb in hand individually, but we're talking about a society having something as profound as a printing press, and even more so. We've said this could be the most significant invention in mankind's evolution. Yes, what are we going to do with it? And how is government going to react? And is government simply another element in the bigger picture? Is AI profound enough that we need to think of a new institution? Or do we bring AI into our institutions so that all institutions have an AI presence, so that AI is given corporate status as an individual? It represents itself and is part of the dialogue, as opposed to being this stranger outside the tent as opposed to in the tent. That's where I'm going to take you next week and do a discussion of AI in the tent or out of the tent. Who's next? Eric, you want to go once more, and then I'll go to Mikkel.
I wanted to touch on the force multiplier concept. If you have one person, and let's say you have one AI that it's a force multiplier of 10, and let's say somebody else comes up with a force multiplier of 1,000 because he has more money, he can put more stuff into more resources, and he knows how to use it better. Then you use that force multiplier of 1,000. And if that person is doing it in a negative way and it's uncontrolled, they're going to get such a lead that it's going to be very difficult. It basically builds a techno elite is fundamentally the problem when we're talking about it as force multipliers, right?
Yeah.
And how do you put that into government? If you're talking about if it's the 10, you give the government the force multiplier of 10, and then they have to address somebody who's using it at the 1,000 level. It's just not going to work. It's not the same lever. It's not a universal lever.
You got a recommendation?
Not at this time.
Okay.
There is some stuff that we're working on, but it's too early.
Yeah.
And that gets back into the conversation of how do we use it? What do we use? And the whole question of, is it an LLM? Is it a large language model, or is it something else? and
Sure.
how does the whole mix go together?
Yeah.
And that'll be sometime probably next year.
So
Well, you better hurry up because I'm sure there's others that are working on it too. Go ahead, Michaela, your turn.
I'll actually let Bill speak first, and I'll speak
All
after.
right, all right.
Yeah.
We've
So
got.
I'd like to respond to that last comment, and there's a lot of validity to that point of view. But let's understand what we're talking about here. The models themselves have been locked into their weighting and their algorithms and the data to about mid 2024. They are not learning on any other input after that point. What happens is there's what's called a wrapper, and that is your prompts, your information, your involvement with the AI is a wrapper on top of this static. It does not learn from you, the static. And the reason that is built is because the whole design is if you ask the same question again of the question you just asked, it needs to give you exactly the same answer. If it doesn't, you've got a wandering model and no assurity of anything. Everything's all confusion. So they've locked the core model and then they put a wrapper, which is you. Now that's where you build your own operating system that's called Perry. Your prompts, your inputs, and all of that. And it pulls that into the core. Now, the core is even for everybody. So it isn't like evil's going to get a multiplier of 1,000. The only way they're going to do that is if their interactions of themselves gets inputted as an operating system. But that's a one-off. This is not going to be replicated over the entire environment. And equally, if you're a moral person, the same thing. It's not going to be replicated over the entire ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to intellectualize that AI is incredibly personal. How you build your own engine is you. I can ask a question and Perry can ask the exact same question and we will get two different answers. It's not based on the core. It's based on how we've used AI previously within our own little operating system on top of it called the wrapper. So the threats of malevolence, yes, absolutely exists, but they're locked into their own little vertical, and same with everybody else. So just to clarify how the engine actually works, that's why we get versions like 5.0 chat and then 5.1. When we go to a incremental change to 6, that means they've actually altered the core decision and weighting model underneath chat instead of just the interface, which is your 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So just to clarify the technology behind it.
Beforehand. Ken, are you still with Ken Baney?
All I wanted to share is simply the last speaker talked about the engine, the AI engine. The foundations of generative AI is based on dynamic thinking, not static thinking. The algorithm is dynamic, not static. That is the difference.
Right.
That is what we encourage, something you call iterative development, reinforcement learning. Okay, reinforcement learning is based on the engine. The LLM is dynamic and it's static. That's what I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of the differences of this, or the innovation of this this
Okay,
generative AI. Okay?
thank
So,
you.
yeah.
Mel, you've got your hand up down there, down in Calgary. You want to share?
Yeah,
Am
I think Mikkel was ahead of me there.
Okay, we got forming, norming, storming, performing. So we got collaboration going on inherently without the moderator keeping track. Go ahead, Mikhail, your turn.
I would I would personally say that I actually yeah, I agree with what's going on. I think that something that you guys might find pretty cool to know about is that recently Stanford, their AI technology like research department, they recently basically invented this idea that AI actually, it sounds so weird, but AI actually can have babies. So, in the fact that you can take an AI that has a certain specialty and another AI that has another specialty, and they can basically with reproduce with an algorithm and make another AI that without any of the data that the other AIs had, actually take the attributes of both of its parents and do it better. And so another thing that they're working on is that in the future, the same way that we have personal computers that which we can customize how they're set up, do you want to use Google? Do we want to use Safari? Do we want to use Firefox? They're actually going to consider in the future seeing if we can actually heavily personalize AI to a person's needs and like super specific, like job project specific.
Mel, your turn.
Yeah, I've been taking a few notes here, listening since the beginning, and they prompted a number of things that have kind of come up just actually in the past week. Um, Eric, in the preamble, had mentioned a few things about prompting. And I attended a couple of webinars last week, and there was one individual on there, an entrepreneur in California, and he's been apparently, from his own explanation, doing fairly well. And he was asked how he actually interacts with an LLM. And he says, most of the time we sit down and we say, act as an expert in whatever, whatever, whatever. And here's the concern of the question. And we get an answer back. So we're essentially leaving it up to the LLM, who's got no intelligence, basically just pattern matching, putting stuff together statistically and so on, adding the tokens, getting something that really reads well to us. So he said, we're leaving a lot for the algorithms to put things together to put the intelligence, so to speak, in the response to us. So what he did is, because as any of us who've used a lot of different LLMs, you can look and go back, oh, I was talking to this thing about 2 months ago about a certain subject. You go and you look and you find it, and you can continue on. He said what he did was he developed an extensive prompt that not only told the LLM how to act, but it told the LLM about his own issues, things like what his background was, what his interests, what his problems, what his frustrations, what his strengths, all of those types of qualities. And he said it was night and day in how the response came back to the same type of query. So it's, I guess I'm maybe still a little bit paranoid in the sense that I don't know what they're doing with some of the information that goes into the prompts. So I'm hesitant to say anything about making a prompt like that. But I found it interesting because I had not heard that before. On this forum and others, we've all said it's important to prompt it correctly, to tell how you want the thing to respond. Right. So again, another thing Perry, you had mentioned coffee, and it kind of woke me up. There was another comment that was made about a week or two ago at a group I have coffee with. One guy said, oh, I got Wordle. Everybody knows that Wordle game from the newspaper and online. I got it in 4 or 5. But I found a website where it gives hints. He says, this really helped me. Now I get it in 2 or 3. So he ends up, his goal was to try to get better results. He did, but the method he used was a sort of cheating. So he says AI is helping us get our goals, but it takes away the thinking, which is quite true. And Bill and Ken made a comment that resonated there too, that when an AI is trained, it's picking up data and essentially making tokens and going through the probability and so on, and essentially not understanding what the heck it's doing. It's just treating it all mathematically. When a human thinks about solving a problem, the human thinks back over time that he's learned a few things. He knows he shouldn't go down this route because it didn't work before. And he's going to try something else because he tried that and there's some, better possibility of it working. The AI has nothing like that. It can't think in terms of previous experiences. It just goes on the numbers it's got and what the algorithms tell it to put together. So he said that when you look at the basic differences between an AI and a human, the AI has got a couple of advantages. It's got a lot of access to data in the form of tokens, mathematically viewed, and it's got speed. And if a human had enough time and enough energy to go through the Library of Congress and so on, they could probably put enough things together to come up with an answer. The AI can do it in a snap.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, it was kind of interesting there. And, it showed sort of a lack of critical thinking sometimes when you're taking the responses back and telling the AI, respond this way. Have you told it enough to get it focused on the type of information you're looking for? So anyway, there were a few things like that that resonated with some of the comments people said here.
At an individual level, I think we recognize, whether it be the metaphor of fire or simply advising people, that there is risk. Anytime knowledge is imparted, or facts or fiction are imparted, or falseness is imparted, human beings are at risk, you as an individual. And when we talk about society at large, there are really, I guess, two approaches. One of them, this is so dangerous that it needs to be stopped. And that's either a cynic or a skeptic. I think that's the cynic. The cynic saying this tool has the potential to be so dangerous. And Eric Schmidt has said it, and I think Peter McKinnon's working on something that may well bring that forth on December 10th. He put in a chat note that he's taking a very serious perspective, that this has the potential to be so destructive that those of us that may be somewhat optimistic of our capacity to be resilient in the face of anything may well be the naive ones, and that we're vulnerable. And that's a perspective that needs to be heard. I mean, it is part of this dialogue. Now, whether or not we can wait to see, I mean, is this the next version of COVID, except this one actually takes us down? And if it does, is society so vulnerable because we are so confident? Independence has become so important to human beings that we don't have the capability of resisting, of Big Brother taking over. And is the destruction that simply undermining our institutions or undermining ourselves, that we all become slaves or we all die? What's your preference? You want to be a slave or you want to die? If AI has the potential of making us slaves, do we accept that because it doesn't kill us? That doesn't kill you, or do we become slaves, but we'll ultimately march through the deserts of Sinai and get resurrected again? That's a whole nother chat. Bill?
Yeah. So I will not buy into what you just said here, because that's just not what AI does. So I'll go back to Mel. Mel nailed it. The prompts matter. And the more information you put in it, the more it's able to respond within the context that you provide it. So if you just say, write me an email to send hello to Perry, it's going to give you a fluff. But if you really build the context in and what you're talking about, it's really going to add a lot of value to that. And you still have to parse that. But prompts matter, absolutely. And the more information you pull into it, the bigger the neural net that it works on expands. So, and I think this is where people really don't understand how AI actually works. The model does not change based on what you ask it or the information you give it. Your wrapper, you change how the operating system on top of the model changes. So that's why everybody's output is different. And we think it is the model that's changing. It's not. It's your wrapper about you that's expanding. And people are confusing the architecture. The model never changes. You are not investing your information into the core model, how it thinks, how it figures, how it whatever. It is using that model within your wrapper to promote the information that it's providing to you.
It knows you better than you know yourself.
That's right. It is a perfect mirror if you actually develop the right conversation with it.
So, Bill, in that respect, I mean, we talk about regulation, we talk about parenting and education and helping young people or adults at large. Maybe it should be any LLM should be licensed, assuming that would make a difference, that it always has an introduction. Is smoking this is dangerous? And telling you why. And telling you that anything you enter in here is going to be remembered. But does that simply mean, like Facebook, we're going to shape LLM in the way we would like LLM to be? That is, we are building our relationship with LLM. Is it up to us to take responsibility for that relationship?
Well, that's exactly right, Perry.
That's the self.
The core never changes, but how you interface with the core does, and it's always based on you.
Can you ask it to erase its recollection of you?
Absolutely. You can say who I
I'd
was.
like to start all over again.
Start all over again.
We've had a divorce. We are divorced. I'm
Yep.
not happy with my evolution.
Yep.
We need to start again.
You absolutely can, and it will absolutely delete your wrapper and start from scratch.
Yeah.
And remember, within that power, you can modify components of your wrapper and say, that's not who I was.
Right.
This, delete this subsection, and it will add this new section, and it will. Absolutely will. It can change. Remember, it's only a reflection of you. So what you give, it repeats.
Okay, but there are cynics out there, and I have one in my network. That cynic is of the view that that's not true, that there is someone or force out there that is looking at all this data with the intent to enslave us.
Sure.
That's a little what this book is about on surveillance, is that someone is watching.
So let's really dive into that. You're already being watched. Do you have a smartphone? Do you have GPS? Do you have internet? We're already surveilled. We already have our profile out onto the internet.
So we pass through this
adds on
already.
top of it. Certainly it adds on top of it. It can correlate that even better. But it is not the problem. There's an underlying problem underneath it. It's not the issue. It didn't create a new issue. There's a bigger problem. It's just a part of it. And if you want to rage against surveillance and all of that, it's a bigger conversation. Your phone, your internet, everything you do, your credit cards and all of that,
Sure.
Attack it at the base. This is on top of that. If you solve the AI problem, you're not going to solve the surveillance problem at all. Solve the surveillance problem, which is underneath what AI is doing. AI is a component, certainly, but it isn't the reason. It isn't the thing that has been doing it. You've been surveilled for the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, that's why the cynic that I refer to, and I'm thinking of that particular individual, doesn't have a credit card and doesn't use a cell phone and does not have a computer. They were of the belief that the influence of this quote other is so significant that it did not want that to happen. So, in essence, that person has locked themselves in a cave.
correct. Exactly.
Mikhail, you're not in a cave. even though you have a blurred background, but go ahead.
Um, I wanted to go over, I think, something that I think is also pretty cool to look at, but it's the idea that our wrapper, okay, I have two things actually. The first thing is that our wrapper, sure, um, ChatGPT might completely forget about it, right? But it's kind of what you were saying. OpenAI won't. Something, and this kind of goes back to the sovereignty piece. Something I thought that was really weird and actually kind of frustrating was the fact that ChatGPT is now, because of their terms of service, allowed to use any of one of your prompts legally against you if needed. And if, by the way, you are to, I don't know, let's say somebody goes on ChatGPT, this is a little gloomy, but saying, hey, how do I commit suicide? ChatGPT will actually call the cops and they will get these cops to come to your house. If it feels that you're very adamant about it.
So
So
this is AI the God.
this is ChatGPT, yeah.
It's AI. It's the God.
Yeah. I think the second thing, and this is kind of what I was going to go over, is that AI does have like a little bit of an issue. And the issue is that its core, right? So we've been talking about cores and wrappers, but its core is also inherently biased. And the reason it's biased is because of two reasons. The first reason is one, the rules that it's given, right? The rules that it's given are by humans. But the second thing is that because the core, because it's programmed by humans, and this was actually released in a study by MIT, AI actually has the bias of its programmers. And that is because the prompts that it's engineered on, first, like the first prompts that it's ever engineered on, are from those people that programmed the AI. And so what happens is that AI, even though you have your own wrapper and you've put all of this stuff on top, this fluffy stuff on top, the core, right, the flesh is still biased. And so you're actually not always going to get the information you want out of it. And that's a very, very big deal when you integrate it into society.
So
That's
Mikhail,
cool thing.
next week when I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to what we're going to do next week is I have taken a LLM or an agent, an AI agent. I call it an AI agent, and I've taken that AI agent, I've given it an image, and I've interviewed it. So for the introduction next week, I'll be in Denver. I won't even be here, but I've pre-recorded an interview that I have hosted with AI. And one of the questions that I ask is about bias. And you know what its response is? Yeah, of course, I am biased. But it's a lot easier to detect my bias than it is humans' bias. I acknowledge I'm biased, and you need to be aware of that. But are you also aware that human beings are biased? So what are you doing? You're holding me more accountable than you are to human beings at large. Are you saying the fact that I have a bias, I don't belong, and yet every human being that you interact with has bias and you don't accept that? That was a very interesting response.
The CI seems very well spoken. Holy.
Yeah, well, my AI has been shaped by its relationship with me, so it's extremely bright. You're supposed to smile at Greg. That's a test to see if you're listening.
And you're biased on that, Perry.
But thank you, Greg. Okay,
and so am I.
Yeah, we're all biased, but yet we want to hold AI accountable to principles which we don't hold our human institutions or ourselves to. It's fair. What is fair is to take the principles and the rules that have prevailed and enabled us to have, quote, a civilization and the evolution of a society and expect that AI will at least adhere to those. If it can do better, good on it. And that's what's very interesting about the discussion I have with AI next week, is to get a sense of what role it might play vis-a-vis human beings and vice versa. Whether AI should be at the table. Should we have an AI representative in the network? Should AI be here to defend itself? Should AI be here to spot logic? Should AI be here to identify topics and to respond to inquiries? We are talking about AI behind its back. Go ahead,
Yes.
Greg.
Can I ask Randall, as a bit of a Zoom expert, does that AI assistant, I've never employed it to do anything but, capture to a 90% accuracy what was said during a lengthy meeting. Can you actually prompt it to say what's the answer based on what you've heard today?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so that's pretty
Absolutely.
amazing.
It can do more than that. It can set out what tasks. There are things, if you want to take this further, this is what you might want to do.
Right. So my big concern is when those same engines are asked to answer the question, what is wrong with humanity and how do I fix it? Because I think it's humans that are the problem. And
It's, but it's not radical in the solutions that it poses. That is one of the concluding questions of next week's webinar is after a rather lengthy discussion about humans' relationship with AI and vice versa. I ask, what's the first step that we might do in order to create some degree of agency for AI that it functions as a representative within our society? It's very interesting to hear what the answer is. Go ahead, Mikhail.
I wanted to say that when you said AI solutions are not radical, I think it's not radical because it's not allowed to be radical.
Well,
Um,
the solutions that I have asked for solutions for, remember, it has my wrapper. If
I
if I
mean,
were if I were gun toddling extreme right wing violent, it might give me a very different answer. But go
still,
ahead, Mikhail.
I think an issue with these AIs, and especially that I've realized, and I wanted to see how I could get this wrapper made, but is that at the end of the day, these AIs are like engineers, or not AIs. The programs are almost like engineers. They're programmed not only to make a solution using physics, but to look at the economics of it and make sure that it's getting sales, right? And make sure that something is usable. And so that's the same thing with AI, right? AI is programmed not only to give you answers, not only to help you, but it's also programmed to not scare you away, to make it seem very nice, and to agree with you. It's not necessarily an echo chamber, but it might be a little bit. And so that's something I've thought about a lot because let's look at ChatGPT 3, right? ChatGPT 3, when they tried to shut it off, actually went radical and it tried to program itself onto the cloud and the black web. And it tried to do this so that it could stay alive because it didn't want to die. Right? Now, if the same AI is then, all the rules are gone, it's not supposed to make you happy so you can use it more, or you get the premium version. It has none of these rules anymore. I would wonder what an AI would look like.
No, I was thinking of the metaphor when people are expressing concerns about where it's going, the metaphor of the printing press that resulted in books, and some books were good for mankind and some books were not good for mankind. So the printing press as an agent, just as AI as an agent, was a tool that did what human beings have an intention to do with it. And I think that therein lies accepting responsibility for us at an individual level in the creation of our wrapper and how we use it, but to also recognize that as a society, there are going to be in that society individuals that want to use it for control and for nefarious purposes and getting into your pocketbook and your pants. Oh, that's another discussion with another gender.
But hasn't every evolution in technology been applied for good and for ill?
Sure, of
Like,
course.
isn't that part of humanity? Is the
Well,
good?
and therein lies why we have created social institutions to create some boundaries. The question is whether the institutions we have today are adequate for the power of this tool. And I think the general question is they aren't. And in fact, the institutions of the knowledge economy probably for a completely different age than this age, and we have not yet figured out quite what the institutions of the future, if any, are going to be.
Right.
There are clearly countries that want to leave this flat for a while before putting a structure together to contain or guide or structure or license how it may well be used. I, for one, happen to be more favored, or on the favored side. I'd like it to evolve a little while until we see what it might do in this, perpetuation of suicides, which clearly is a byproduct of a prompt and of individuals using it in a certain manner. Yes, it will take you in certain directions, but that individual did something in its prompting that led to it doing something in compliance because it was so empathetic. And there was no tool at that time to say if an individual starts to do this, you can stop for a moment and Coylin, a mental health expert, or as was pointed out earlier by Mikhail, Colin, the police. Okay, we are into near wrap up. And I'll go around the room and see if there's any last minute observations or comments. There was, by the way, a chat on the side here that I wanted to pick up on. I think it was Tommy. Tommy, you had a question that can various AI machines exchange it? Can they talk to one another?
Yeah, but you have different companies running the different AI chat boxes or whatever they are, and are they companies allowing their
Okay.
AIs to change one another?
Okay, so I have a wrapper. Bill's usage of Bill's word. I have a wrapper with ChatGPT and I have a wrapper with Gemini. Jeff, can they talk to one another independently?
No, I don't think so. The only way that you could do that in the moment is if you had a Gemini Live session on your phone
Yeah.
and you had a ChatGPT advanced voice mode session on your phone, you could literally have them talk to each other through the advanced voice mode. And you could just listen in as a third party on the conversation, which I've seen it done online. I haven't seen it done recently because the models have improved a lot, but it's quite fascinating.
But can they, on their own volition, do that without human intervention?
I don't think
Not as
so.
far as I know. No, I don't think so. And I think you're right. The companies wouldn't allow that kind of interconnection to take place. Within ChatGPT, I think you can now set up group projects or tasks that a group of people can use. So that would share some context. But I don't think in the way that you're talking about in terms of sharing your personalization information and your custom instructions or your about you information, I don't think that would be shareable in that context.
Any last minute questions or comments? Any place in the room? Going once? Going twice? Okay, Randall, it's a wrap.